เคครับสวัสดีครับวันนี้นะครับผมวิทินันท์มาเป็น moderator ของเซสชันนี้นะครับชื่อ The Future of the Retail Store Design in Digital Age นะครับก็คือกิจกรรมนี้จะอยู่ในกิจกรรมของคณะที่ชื่อว่า Architecture Design for Society 2024 นะครับก็คือกิจกรรมนี้มันจะเป็นกิจกรรมที่ทางคณะเนี่ยจะเรียนเชิญผู้มีความรู้ในทางด้านวิชาการด้านประสบการณ์ทางการออกแบบเนี่ยมาให้ความรู้ทั้งในระดับนานาชาติและระดับในชาตินะครับเพื่อมาให้ความรู้และแชร์ประสบการณ์แก่คนทั่วไปนะครับซึ่งสำหรับผู้ที่เป็นสถาปนิกหรือผู้ที่มีใบประกอบอาชีพเนี่ยครับสามารถสะสมแต้มพวต.ได้นะครับจากการลงทะเบียนครั้งนี้แล้วก็ส่วนผู้เข้าฟังบรรยายที่เป็นนิสิตเนี่ยที่มากกว่าเข้าฟังกิจกรรมเนี่ยมากกว่า 80% ของปีเทอมการศึกษา 2567 เนี่ยเราสามารถเอาสิ่งเนี้ยไปทำเป็นเครดิตแบงค์หรือหน่วยสะสมหน่วยการเรียนรู้แล้วก็สามารถเอาหน่วยกิจนี้ทรานส์ฟอร์มเข้าไปเป็นหน่วยกิจของคณะสถาปัตย์ได้นะครับก็คือทางคณะสถาปัตยกรรมศาสตร์จุฬาลงกรณ์มหาวิทยาลัยขอขอบคุณบริษัทนิปปอนเพนท์เดคอเรทีฟโคตติ้งประเทศไทยจำกัดบริษัทสกุลไทยจำกัดและบริษัทวูดมาร์คไทยแลนด์จำกัดนะครับที่ให้การสนับสนุนกิจกรรมนี้เป็นอย่างดีนะครับลำดับต่อไปเนี่ยเดี๋ยวขอเรียนเชิญท่านคณบดีเปิดงานและกล่าวขอบคุณพอไว้ได้ครับ
So thank you. I love this advertising video. It's remind me about sitting in the cinema, except we don't have a popcorn and soda here. But I promise you that next year we're gonna have a new space that you can have a popcorn and soda when you're listening to the city lecture. Right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome again to Faculty of Architecture, Chulalongkorn University. Today is a great honor for us to have a very expert in retail design because the thing that we're going to have topic of discussion today is about the retail design and the trends that we're going to change especially when we face a lot of marketing opportunities change like the online shoppings and behavior of customers it's changed. We are going to discuss how can we cope with that with the new store design. And it's a great honor for us to have Paul White from BGY office from London, who is an expert retail design. He designed a lot of retails and store, including in Europe and also in Bangkok, Thailand. So this is our second time that we have Paul White here. So every time he's come to Bangkok, we always grab him and have a lecture here. Thank you very much, Paul White. And I would like to give this floor to you. And I hope that at the end we will have a good discussion about the retails. Thank you very much.
Hear me? Oh, I've got to press the button. Right. Okay, thank you for inviting me back to do another talk. I've got two presentations. The first one is very short, gives an overview of the practice so you can kind of get an idea about what we do as a business. And then we're going to focus in on retail design and really get to the issues that we feel that we're facing as designers in that sphere. So we are Buckley Yeoman. This is us as a practice. This is our studio in Shoreditch. We are architects, but we are also interior architects as well, and we balance both of those on all of our projects. So we have a seamless design approach between the envelope, the interior, and everything that we develop in between. And we do not distinguish between those kind of boundaries. For us, they're blurred. We are 150 people. We are in lots of different sectors. When we set the business up, we said we did not want to be specialists. We wanted to be a practice that was capable of doing lots of different work, because we feel the more variety that we do, the better that is for our business and our product and what we design. We're in the top 100 architectural practices in the world and the top 25 in the UK as well. These are our main sectors. We work in workplace, residential, hotels, schools, and retail. And we have 3 offices. The main office is in London. We have a second office in Bristol, which is in the southwest of the UK. And then we have an office in Madrid, Spain. And we talk about architecture and design, but we also talk about ourselves as agents of opportunity, finding the unexpected, finding the joy in the work that we produce and making the people that use it feel good. We feel our work is sensitive and authentic, and we are unapologetically joyful in our design. And we like to think that we sit the right side of unconventional. There's convention, and then there's us, just the right side of unconventional. So, we do architecture. We do large master planning projects like this in central London, designing individual new build office buildings. We design student accommodation. This is a 23-story tower in Aldgate. We also do retrofit, and I was very fortunate to be asked to talk about retrofit the last time I was here. And this is a good example of that, where we're taking existing buildings and adapting them for future generations. We see here the seamless design between the outside and the inside in terms of the architecture and the interior architecture. We also delivered this building in central London, new build office. Again, each of our projects is different. Each one is relating to the brief and the client and the aspirations that each project portrays. And the one thing that you won't see in our work, hopefully, is a common cookie cutter style. We think about each project as a unique project for that client and for that location to be able to deliver the work that you're seeing on the screen. This is a project I spoke about last time I was here, YY London, a refit of an existing building in Canary Wharf with this amazing light feature that runs through the whole space as a ribbon. And Technique, one of the most sustainable projects we've delivered in London, built completely out of timber construction on the upper levels. This project is up for an award in Singapore in about a month, so fingers crossed we can do some good work with that. Cromwell Place, listed buildings into a gallery, school projects, and then also interior architecture. The reason that I'm here today is to talk to you about some of our work in the retail sector. You'll see the first few slides are the projects that we finished in Bangkok. This one is in Central Embassy. We also did one in Icon Siam and M Quartier as well. We also started off working with Fred Perry. Can you hear me? Yeah. We started off working with Fred Perry in their central London office, and I'll tell you a little bit about this when we go through that. But we've been fortunate to work around the world as their global designer, delivering over 15 stores for them to date. Our work also extends into workplace, so designing places for people to enjoy working in, to bring them back into the office. I don't know whether it's the same issue that you have in Thailand, but in the UK, after the pandemic, encouraging people to come back into the workplace has been really difficult. And our sensitive approach to design enables people to be able to use space effectively and create a home from home. Here we have another interior project, and I'll just zip through these to give you a flavour, and then we'll move on to the main project. Right. And then just to finish on, we are slightly unconventional. So this is Shoreditch Arts Club. This is a project that is self-initiated from us. We opened Private Members Club just at the bottom of our office, and we've had some amazing parties and some amazing events, and it becomes a showcase for what we do as a business and kind of gives people that sense of what it's like to work with us when they employ us. So now let's move on to the next presentation if we can, which is the retail one. Thank you. So I'm super excited to be able to share with you the thoughts that we have as a business on the way that retail design is developing. I think it's fair to say we live in unprecedented times. I've seen in my career a transformation in terms of high street, the shopping malls, let alone the design of shops. Arguably, the single most important factor in that has been the digital age. The fact that all of us have these things and we all shop with them, we all do everything we can in our lives, has had a dramatic effect on what people now want and consider for a physical shop. So for you as students, you've grown up with that, and that's not necessarily a problem, but it's more of an issue for retailers that have physical space to try and incorporate that and think about how that affects how they retail from their stores. So this presentation is going to talk about future trends. It's going to talk to you about some of the issues that we've encountered, certainly as a country and as a continent, with the change in digital age, but also importantly, giving solutions to the problem, giving ideas about what we think we need to do in order to be able to change the dynamic and make the physical store more relevant. I hope you enjoy the presentation. It's all about shopping. We love shopping. It should be fun. So, as I said, the digital age has fundamentally changed what we do as designers and how we think about it, and it's dramatically reshaping the high street. For the last 10 years, we've seen the ascendancy of online retailing. Consumers, us, have embraced the convenience, the ease of it, the competitive nature of it, in order to be able to use digital to the full. Interestingly, in 2019, a report was produced that said that 9 years later, in 2028, more than half of all retail transactions would be done online. Okay? In 2022, when they did a snapshot, it was more than a quarter, and that report was written before COVID-19. So arguably, that acceleration is happening quicker and greater than anyone thought back in 2019. Interestingly, more than 1 in 4 retail sales currently from textile clothing and footwear are made from online channels. So we're already seeing a huge shift away from the physical to the digital. The pandemic created those ideal conditions for e-commerce to thrive. It forced us to stay away, to force us to isolate, and to therefore use technology for what we needed it for. And this is slightly depressing because it's a series of charts that really show what's happening to our high street, the fact that our high street is shrinking, the fact that fashion shops are seeing the most closures as part of their trading, and unfortunately, chains are closing stores faster than they're opening. So there's a fundamental shift in what is happening on the high street. Retail malls that were designed 10 years ago that are perhaps not in optimum positions are becoming obsolete. And we certainly have images like this in our high streets where shops are boarded up and there is no requirement for retail in those locations. And it's forcing us to think about alternative uses to bring life back into those areas. So what's causing it? There's something that we have in the West called a cost of living crisis. The Ukraine war has meant that prices have gone up. We have inflation that is difficult to control. We have a whole lot of pressures on our lifestyles, which is meaning that we need, or is pushing people to look for best value. But people want value, they want convenience, they want an experience. How do we bring that into the retail experience in a store to be able to change perceptions? So what does physical retail need to do to maintain its relevance in the digital age? And we believe that the customer experience has never been more important. Today's customers want the best of both worlds. They want the online convenience, but they want the offline experience as well that's going to connect them to the brand that they're investing in. So it's a sort of an in-store experience is still, we believe, ever so important in terms of that approach. So I've got 10 pointers, 10 things that we think about when we design retail. Not all of them are incorporated in projects, but in some shape or form, these are now trends that are emerging and that we're seeing a part of the design of retail stores. So the first one is an in-store experience. So forward-thinking retailers are emphasizing that experience. The best brands give people a reason to visit their stores beyond the products that are for sale. And this image is taken from a Lululemon store where they're doing an in-store yoga class for people that are customers of that brand. But they're even cleverer than that, because before this store was open, they would open a studio in the community to engage with future customers on what their store and what their values were going to be about. So it really takes into account that sort of sense of them opening a shop and considering the people that are going to be using it. We all know Apple. We all know Apple do retail incredibly well. They do it to an extent where they're launching products, they're launching how-to moments so that you can understand their technology, you can get the most out of the products that you're buying, and their stores are designed to allow that to happen so that it's a seamless experience. The other thing that we think about is something called multi-layered spaces. And what we mean by this is that the retailer is emphasizing the emotional connections between the customer and the brand to surprise, inspire, excite, and educate to build that brand loyalty. This is a retailer called Rafa. They sell sportswear for cyclists. If you are a cyclist, Rafa is close to your heart, potentially, in terms of what you want to buy. But when you go there, you get more than your shorts and your t-shirt. You get an experience that brings in other aspects of cycling, whether that's the maintenance, the technology, the knowledge, all of those things that people are buying into, not only when they buy their shorts, but they're buying into that brand. And we did the same with Fred Perry. We introduced moments where people could have coffees, where they could have discussions, that they could actually meet the people that worked in that environment in a way that helped to kind of build a sense of ownership with them and the store. The other thing that we're seeing is this joining together of the physical and the digital, and come up with this rather crazy name called phygital, which is a word I can't even say in English, let alone how you would say it in a different language. And it's really combining the best of both worlds. This is an image taken from Burberry, and they give each customer a playful animal character that evolves and engages as they use the store and use it in a social aspect to be able to make a connection and to make that connection between what they're selling and them in the digital age. So they're investing in that digital technology. Chanel are doing the same thing. They've teamed up with Farfetch. They call it the Magic Mirror, and the brand is incorporating augmented reality as part of that retail experience to be able to sort of offer something that is a high-tech dressing space, it's a boutique visit, and it's even a personal shopper, all together in this kind of connected mirror. The other thing that we see and we've been part of is diversification. This sense that actually what the physical stores are doing is they're diversifying to be relevant. They're hosting events, they're creating launch events, they're doing brand collaborations, they're doing music events, they're even doing lectures in there, because we're designing stores that are not about fixed items. They're about movable items that can allow them to curate a space and get more out of it other than just retail. And we've done that in several different locations. The other thing that really great retailers are doing is that they're using their stores to educate. They're educating their customers about their brand. They're educating them about what it is that makes their brand particular. And we've got sort of different retailers doing different things. This is a kind of a clothing retailer who's talking about how clothes are mended, how they're kind of recycled, and there's a real sense that there's a connection between that brand and the clothing. We do it with Fred Perry. Fred Perry has a long lineage of history, from Fred Perry, the tennis player who won Wimbledon in the 1930s, through to a sportswear brand in the 50s and 60s, through to subculture in the 70s and 80s. And that education is about giving the brand a kind of an awareness to the next generation so that they see where that brand has come from. We talked about Lululemon as a sort of reach out into the community, but they're sort of using their space to root it into the community, making sure that the people that they're going to engage with are engaging with them as a retailer in that location. And it has this sort of huge cultural benefit. Fred Perry do it through music. They can also do through it in terms of photography, which I'll show you in a minute as well. Toast are, I don't know if you have Toast in Thailand. They're a sort of a boutique retailer, and they are heavily into sustainability. So they have a kind of sustainability vein that runs through their clothes. And here they're talking about how to live more sustainably. Again, engaging with their customers so that they're buying into the brand, but also the brand's values. And then we have that flexibility approach. So this is a picture taken on the opening night of the store, and that's the picture taken the next day after they cleared it all up. So it has that flexibility to be able to incorporate people, incorporate events, but also still be a retail space when it's finished. The other thing that we've found is that research that we've been looking at has shown that a significant percentage of people will use a store almost as a gallery. They'll come along to see a product, to feel it, to touch it, to see whether they want it, and then they will buy that product online. They'll use it effectively as a gallery, somewhere that they can go and do. And I'll talk about this project in a bit more detail. This is Apparatus, and they do exactly that. They are a high-end furniture, lighting, and objects retailer, and they have designed with us their store to be a gallery. You can't walk out with a piece of furniture, but you can certainly pay for it and have it delivered the next day. And then something similar happening in Tokyo with Gallery 5, which is a fully flexible retail space that is used for multiple uses over and above just being a retail space. And then something that we're going to talk about in more detail is this idea about brand activation. And I think one of the things that we see that's a kind of a lazy approach to design is when people just stick a logo in the shop and say, that's Adidas, or that is Nike. It's not really utilizing the brand and utilizing them as a brand in the way that we do. And we'll talk about this in more detail with the work that we do with Fred Perry. And then finally, it's this idea that they can provide something extra. And again, the work we've done with Fred Perry, this is a photo shoot. They have a professional photographer comes in for the weekend. Anybody that is wearing Fred Perry can come along, have their picture taken in whatever pose they want, whatever they want to do, and build that loyalty with the brand. And this is another similar one where people are coming in to talk about how they can repurpose the clothes they bought from the same store. So it's about trying to make several different connections within that. And if we talk about an experience, if we talk about retail as an experience, I went yesterday to M-Sphere in Bangkok, and I thought that in many ways was the optimum experience. I went there thinking I'm buying a coffee, and I ended up on the beach having a tequila. And it's that kind of idea that you go somewhere and that it kind of escalates into something else, because actually you get a full experience across a lot of different channels in that one visit that I made into that space. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. So I'm sure you've all been to there several times and experienced it yourself. Right. So I'm going to talk about these projects. I'll talk about them fairly quickly so we can have lots of questions at the end. But I wanted to talk off with how we started out with Fred Perry. We started working with them in 2009, and we started with their offices, the little offices in Covent Garden, where we had to incorporate 90 people over 4 floors and a whole series of meeting rooms. We did that quite well, and they really enjoyed the kind of layouts that we did and all the details. And then we had this conundrum, we had this problem where we had a tiny reception space on the ground floor, and it was in Covent Garden. And if you ever come out of Covent Garden Tube Station, you will know that you are in the middle of the West End. And they said to us, Paul, you cannot put the name Fred Perry on the outside. If you do that, people will come in to the front door and want to buy a polo shirt from us, and we're not selling anything because we're the office. So we said, okay, we'll take inspiration from your laurel and we'll make that the signpost for what we're going to do with your reception. So we came up with this idea of the laurel that would present itself in the window, but then would kind of morph into a series of different spaces. It becomes a seat, and then it becomes a floor, then it becomes a reception desk. And that one idea was then translated into 550 pieces of plywood, all different shapes and sizes, all made by this poor chap over here who had to make sure everyone fitted. And then it morphed into this signage, seat, floor, and then reception. And that's what it looked like when it finished. It became instantly identifiable with Fred Perry. It didn't say Fred Perry on the door, so if you didn't know the brand, you wouldn't realize what it was. And it has this lovely softness to it, even though it's made from plywood, that gives it a real sinuous curve in the space. And this was a great introduction for us because it showcased what we do, how we think, and what we can do for a client. So they said to us, we'd like you to have a look at the first shop. We'd like you as designers. We'd never designed a fashion retail outlet before, and therefore they were taking a chance on us. So what we did was we really got under the skin of them as a client, trying to understand what that brand is about, how we as designers are going to make a physical manifestation of that brand was really key. They have a hugely important digital presence. It's really well used. They look at all of the collaborations they do up here with George Cox, Rafe Simmons, Community, Bape. All these things are front and center with what they do as a brand. We talked about subculture. They are hugely into the kind of people that follow them as a brand, what music they listen to, how they lead their lives, and they tap into that in a really positive way. They talk always about this man. This is Fred Perry. This is 1936. He's just about to win Wimbledon for the first time, first Englishman to win it. And his legacy with the design of the polo shirt is really important to them in order to be able to have a history and a grounding for the product, as well as more contemporary people who are passionate about the brand, about wearing it, about being visible when they're wearing it. Is all about them and them celebrating Fred Perry. And the fans, the people that are ordinary people that love the brand. And it's called, they call it the uniform of the non-uniform. The uniform of the people that don't kind of fit into society, that they don't follow the rules, that don't want to be part of the norm. And it goes deep, it goes skin deep. These people are passionate about the brand to the point where they'll have tattoos that really say, I love the brand, I love Fred Perry. So that was our research. And then we learned a very, very important lesson. We made the first presentation to the client. This is the client on the right. This is John Flynn. And we did the presentation and we said, the t-shirts are going to go here. The belts will go over here. We've designed something for all of the shoes to go over here. And he stopped us mid-presentation and said, Paul, stop. Don't talk to me about fashion and retail if you don't know my language. It's polo shirts, it's accessories, it's footwear. Go away and learn the language before you come back and tell me what you're going to do with my store. And that was a lesson that we learned, that we think of ourselves as creative and as designers, and we think that we can do everything. But when you are in a specific sector, they have rules, they have a language that you need to understand in order to be able to communicate with those people. once you know the language, you can break the rules, but you can't break the rules until you know what you're talking about. And that was a really important lesson for us that this gentleman enjoyed giving. We went on to design, we have designed to date, 15 stores worldwide. So, I'm going to talk to you about White City, Henrietta Street in London, and Central Embassy in Bangkok. So, White City, a very conventional 8-meter wide by I think about 30-meter long space. And we thought about it in really clear ways. We thought, we've got 260 meters squared, we're going to put all the back of house at the back, we're going to have the main shop in the middle, and we're going to have a wow moment at the front of the store. But we wanted to do it in a really controlled way. We wanted to do everything with one piece of furniture, with one central element. We wanted to be able to have a cash till, a collection for clothing, a seat, or presenting the garments in a controlled way. And we came up with this idea, like the piece of art on the left, that we could create a tablet that could do all those things. Then we thought about the materials. What materials are essentially going to express a Fred Perry store? Black metal, concrete, parquet floor, brass accent. If you know the brand, you'll know these are the badges that people wear that are fans of the brand, and then exposed services. And then we had this eureka moment. Does anybody know anamorphic projection? You come across that before? Yeah? What it is that when you stand in a certain position, it's true and it's right. You'll see it often on sports, live sports. They'll put the name of a sponsor on the pitch, and you'll see from the camera angle that it's Heineken or whatever. But then when you move away from it, you realize that it isn't what you thought it was, because each piece is painted in a different way to create the illusion of a perfect piece. So we thought this was a great idea. How can we use this in a Fred Perry store? So we came up with this idea that when you first came into the store, you would see the laurel in the space, but the laurel would take up the whole space from front to back, but would appear a perfect piece on that entry. So when you moved around the laurel, you realized that it was a series of different scales of leaves presenting themselves in the space. So, because it was a new idea, we had to build a model to make sure it worked. We built prototypes to see what we needed to do, how we were going to hang them from the ceiling. And then we laid out the store in a really regimented way. We had the entrance piece here, we had this series of tablets in the middle, all of which could do the things that we talked about, the cash till, the seat, displaying the individual pieces, and then use the sides of the store to do everything else we needed to do. This was the idea of the laurel being suspended from the ceiling. And then we activated the brand at the front. So we did it here and we did it with the laurel. We referenced Fred Perry, the tennis, the history that he has with the brand. And that when you then walked in, you saw perfectly the laurel made up of a series of individual suspended gold leaves. But then when you move through the store, you realize the playing with geometry, playing with scale to create that illusion that you got. And it becomes, from the front door, the brand, to a piece of sculpture as you move through the store. And we incorporated 6,000 buttons as a wall at the end of the space, as a piece of decoration. The next store we did was Henrietta Street, different scale, central London location, 4.7 meters wide, and a basement space as well, really rather grubby, interior in terms of its arrangement, nothing particularly exciting to see from the existing arrangement. And then we thought about it in terms of a concept of about having it in three spaces: a principal space, an engagement space, and a space to exhibit and to present the garments. And we had this idea, this notion that we could have this plinth and this idea of this lighting piece that could showcase whatever it was that Fred Perry wanted to showcase in a really controlled way. And we thought, how would the palette change from the front door all the way through to the back, and how we could introduce a kind of a coldness at the front and then transition to tiles and then end up with this warmth at the back, so that there's a real sense that you move through the store in the design. So the first off was we took inspiration from the shop fronts about what would a Fred Perry shop look like if you came across it for the first time. We felt that it should be about stained glass. It should be about a detail within that harks back to that sort of period that the shirt was first designed. Then we thought about the way that we needed to design the store to give them flexibility to be able to move these pieces around, to utilize the spaces on either side, introduce timber, introduce paneling, and expose brickwork to give us that authenticity. And then we saw this sort of educational space. And I'll talk about this in a minute, but we introduced a jukebox. We introduced some display for how to display the historical shirts that they had to show, and the collaborations as well. And then we had the sort of special space at the back, the area that they could transform and use however they needed to as the brand developed. So a simple plan that utilizes the center section and then creates this second space, the third space, at the back. So that's the shop front. This is the laurel, this time fractured by a series of vertical steel fins, displaying the work on movable furniture to allow them to move things around as they need to. That flexible space in the middle. The main space at the back. That connection between the rough and the smooth. And then sort of activating the brand, introducing the Fred Perry soundtrack. Each store has a different soundtrack. Each store relates to the community that it's in. So when you go to the stores in Bangkok, you will hear different music to the one you would expect to hear in London. They make it personal to the space and to the city. Here we're telling a story about the classic M1, M3, M2 and M12 shirts, which were designed through the 50s and 60s, so that people who are buying their contemporary shirt can see where that history came from, where that evolution happened. And then this was a collaboration in the 1960s, again, is used as a piece of art within the store. And then we tell the story of Fred Perry, the history, in the changing rooms through what Fred did and how the brand has developed since the 50s. And then in the basement, we created a gallery space that allows for Fred Perry to either showcase an artist that's coming to the front, something local to the community, but gives them that flexibility to do whatever they want in that basement. So, final. Shopping mall, Bangkok. Fairly simple and straightforward layout, 11.6 by 9.4 meters. And our concept was to reference the history of the brand, to tell stories about how we had developed the brand for them. And we took this idea of taking the laurel and then deconstructing it and making it a series of leaves that fell on the floor. So I'm not sure we would have done this for the first Fred Perry store, but by this time I think we were on number 10, so I think they were comfortable with how we were going to do it. But what it meant was that we could play with positive space and negative space, and we can use the negative to create the enclosure for the shop. bit like this sculpture, where you carve into something and that carving becomes the main piece, even though you're sitting within an overall piece you can see there. So the idea was that these leaves had dropped on the floor and you would get a sense that the laurel was there, but it was deconstructed. And that developed into a plan and some axonometric views and a sort of a different approach to materiality. We're conscious that each shop is in a different location. This is in a mall, it's not in a high street, it's not in Munich, it's not in London, it's in Bangkok. It's sitting next to Louis Vuitton, it's next to Chanel, other places like that. It needs to have a different aesthetic, but still be authentic to Fred Perry. So we've got this concrete, an exposed aggregate, a black stained timber, and then a bronze finish, which are the principal materials. We then worked hard on the refinement of the detailing, developed the drawings further, so you can still see here the laurels, even though they are distorted. And then did these basic drawings. We do a mixture for Fred Perry of photorealistic, but also design drawings. Again, I think it's too easy to just go straight to a polished visual, and you're taking a client on a journey, and our client was one that was educated enough to read drawings. So finished photographs. Here from the outside, you get the first glimpse of the first deconstructed laurel here with the hanging rail. The idea of a box in a box. So you see the glass here, and then we control how you see into the shop, whether you're seeing the polo shirts, whether you're seeing a portion of the laurel. And then inside, reading the tips, the two tips that is the classic piece on the polo shirt, reading the edge of the laurel and replicating that on the floor as well. So, two final projects. How are we doing for time? We okay? Good, okay. Different scales and different types. So this is a boutique for a lady called Grace Han, who has a shop in Kensington and Chelsea that we designed for her. This is the shop before. This was her neighbours. And it was going to be the flagship. And she had a very wealthy benefactor that was investing in her business. And when we opened the store, she only had 4 handbags to sell. So we had more space than we needed, but we knew that she was developing the bag through her time in London and that this store would be their kind of flagship. And it was a traditional London house with offices on the 1st and 2nd floor, and then the boutique on the ground and basement. And our approach was to have this flow, the sense that you were moving through the space and that no one space was more important than the other. And that we wanted to reference the past, but to have a twist on that past. So the first part was about the upper boutique. It was about having that sense of luxury, that sense of place, that sense of display coming into the store, viewing down into the mezzanine level, using the height, using the ability to carve into the walls these display pieces for the individual items, as well as works on the ground. And then to then allow people to come down, so this is a plan showing that arrangement. And the materiality was about luxury. It was about marble, it was about a plaster render finish, and about a steel powder coated finish. And then you came down to the lower boutique space, which was much more about personal shopping, much more about engagement with the brand, engagement with the product in a completely different, softer experience, slightly more separate from the main space to give a more personal approach to retail. Some of the drawings that we did. And then the finished photographs showing the jewel-like front, the main space with that arrangement of the bags cut into the wall. the lights, that sort of kind of personal shopping space on the lower floor. And then finally, apparatus. So we talked about the evolution of retail. We talked about how retail is developing. This is very much, I think, an iteration of that. So this is Mayfair. This is where the store is. These are the designers for the brand back in New York. They are a multidisciplinary design company. They design lighting, furniture, and objects. And this space in London was about presenting that in that location. So the first store was in America. This was their first store outside of America in London. And they wanted to be able to display an ever-changing visual environment. Because their products are coming out all the time, we couldn't have something that was static. We had to design something that was enabling them to be able to display. So we had this vision, which was about 2 levels, a ground floor level that was a kind of a sort of a public face, more showroom type, and then the lower ground, which was more of a sense of going underground, so darker tones, a warmer, more subtle, softer way to approach design. And the street presence was important, the glimpse that you got into the showroom, the way that we used the windows to showcase the works that they were selling, and then the idea that we're placing objects in space, and these objects can change and develop as they bring out new products and as things change. And one of the things I'll talk about is the design of this ceiling. So this ceiling had to be able to be taking load from light fittings and things that could be suspended in any location. So we had to get power up there. We also had to be able to get weight up there as well. So it has this calmness, it has a kind of serene approach, it has a gallery type feel to it, the way that the twin columns give that sort of grandeur in the space to allow them as a brand to be seamless between what we did as the architecture, the interior architecture, and what they do as designers of lighting and objects. And then moving down to the lower ground floor, it was a completely different environment. It was about introducing a leather, darker colours, darker shades, so there was a real sense that you were leaving one space and going into another. So part of the process was trying to work out how in this classical environment could we incorporate all of this stuff all of the services that need to go into that space, but still allow us to hang anything that we need to from this grid. And we came up with this idea of a steel grillage that sat above there, and then a sort of a cast concrete piece that goes into there that allows fixings in these different positions to give them flexibility. And that was then done and cast in Italy, I think it was, and then shipped over, and allows us to create this uniform grid-like structure that would allow fixings in almost 100% of the location. And a lot of time went into the detailing to ensure that we were crafting every junction, every column head, every aperture, every arrangement of paneling that comes together was carefully considered. So this is the finished product, a boutique showroom in the centre of Mayfair that looks very similar to the CGIs, that allows them to be completely flexible with the arrangement, where the lights go, where they're suspending them down, all of those things are incorporated in the design. Creating special moments for displaying. So here we put a net curtain here to allow for art to be hung, to be having a pendant light fitting and a setting for one of their tables. And then as you move down from the ground floor, the tone changes, the conversation changes, and it's much more subdued, much a different environment, allows them to present their work in a completely different way. So, to summarize, I think the best retailers use their physical space to create that experience. We've tried to do it certainly with apparatus, with Fred Perry, and to try and make that connection with the community. So getting involvement with them, certainly as we've done with Lululemon, really pays dividends for them as a brand to be able to make that connection. This multi-layering of spaces, this idea that you are experiencing more than just what you're seeing when you come into the store is really important, to be able to surprise and inspire people in that retail experience. Again, we think is really important. And then to stay relevant and to compete, we're giving people experiences. You know, M-Sphere is a great example that gives people a fantastic experience in terms of their retail experience, and it brings people together. And that is a thank you very much from me.
Thank you so much for giving us an inspired lecture. The next session will be the Q&A session from the floor. มีคำถามไหมครับถ้ามีคำถามยกมือได้เลยนะจะส่งไมค์ไปให้ได้ถามก่อนก็ได้ครับ Okay. For my question, I like for my question, I like the word unconventional. I think it's important for students and architects should be take act in this the word unconventional that you say in the beginning. So my question is, when you got the brief from the client and then your client gonna give you just the brief for the retail, or you suggest another activity that you put in the program, just not just the retail and the February, which gonna have the brand event or the yoga or something. That's how you give them inspired.
So it might be surprising to hear that the brief that we would typically get from Fred Perry would be very mathematical. You know, it'd be like, we need this size of unit, we've got that unit, we need to have X number of garments for women, for men and for children in this store, and we intend to retail X, Y, Z, and that's it. There is nothing beyond that that talks about the things that we've talked about. They look to us to bring forward the conversation about other things that they should do in that store. That doesn't mean they don't have an opinion, and that doesn't mean that they don't say, I don't like that or I like that. And they'll have opinions about what we've done in the past and whether they think it's worked as well or not. But from the starting point, it is quite prosaic. It's quite mathematical in terms of that requirement.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I really appreciate that. And I like the term that you use, the uniform of the non-uniform, right?
Yes.
Yes, and you have used the in-store concept in the UK shop, especially the Fred Perry shop.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you have to design a Fred Perry store in Bangkok, do you still use that concept of like community space or in-store experience to shops in Bangkok? Because when some products from the West, or especially the UK, come to Thailand, is perceived as like luxury brand.
Yes.
Not something that can be community.
I think you've raised a really good question, because I think you're quite right. When we're designing in Thailand, in Amal, you're right. It's seen as a luxury brand, where in the UK it's seen as a streetwear, more kind of a different approach. And it's priced accordingly in Thailand to reflect that. And therefore, the aesthetic of how we think about the stores in a boutique, in a mall is different because we know that we are sitting next to the high-end brands and the perception is that. And the challenge for us is to try and bring that, or we call it authentic, you know, can you be your authentic self? Can you be honest about what it is that you're trying to do and not lose the honesty of the brand? And it's difficult to do if you're doing it in marble and polished brass because that isn't authentic to Fred Perry. But yes, it's a good question. We do have to change our thinking in that environment.
High street to luxury.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
มีคำถามไหมครับ
I just follow the questions about the Fred Perry store in Thailand as well. Because Fred Perry store in London that you've done is quite simple and quite, have a straightforward language of the store. But I mean, in Thailand, it's just quite a brave design.
Yes.
You
Yes.
change. It's quite surprised me that with a rectangular glass block, and you block out the visual connection to the store and carving the new playful elements of that. Is that because the behavior of the customer in Thailand, or even the design of their polo shirt, which I saw, it's quite different from the collection in London?
It is.
Is that the concept of the owner?
Yeah, well, it was the concept of ours because what we wanted to do was we didn't want to give away the experience of the store from the outside. We wanted to control what the customer saw. They could see that it was Fred Perry because it said Fred Perry. You could see the laurel. You could get glimpses into the store to see there. But we wanted the big reveal. We wanted a sense of walking in there and having that wow moment rather than get it all the way around the outside and have nothing to show when you come into the space. So it was bold and it was confident to do that, but it sort of made a space in the space, if that makes sense. I'd be interested to know whether people like it or not, but I love it. I think it's the best one we've done in Asia for sure. I think it works really well. And also the confidence from Fred's to let us, mess with this because they're very precise about what you can do with the laurel, and they let us deconstruct it. So, yeah.
So what about the collections? Are they the same with the London store and Thailand store, or they made a difference?
They do have a common collection through all the stores. They do different sizes for different locations, and we have to think about where things go because Westerners are a bit taller than Asian people, and that changes the ergonomics of the design. But effectively, you can walk into a London store and buy this t-shirt, or you can get it in Bangkok.
มีคำถามไหมครับ
Thank you. I'd like to ask about the last store that was about the multidisciplinary designers, right? So I find it particularly interesting that the two floors you designed in two different aesthetics. And is that because it was to accommodate the possibility of a wide range of products or designers, furniture or whatnot, or was that something given by the client? Could you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think with that store, the apparatus store, we had a sense of what their collection was to date because we could see it, but we knew that they might come out with some really big tables or some big chandeliers. So we needed to create a flexible space to allow that, but not to the point where it was dull and uninviting, that there had to be a quality in the space, which is why the ceiling is kind of so intricate. In the same way that you've thought about the ceiling in this space is an engaging map, we thought of that in a similar way. How can we design something that is flexible but engaging, even if there's nothing in the space? And I think it's worked really well.
Thank you very much.
มีคำถามไหมครับ Okay, my last question. When you start to present each the shop, you refer to the art piece, the art and the artistic idea before you start. My question is how you select the art piece before you apply to your design, or you got the site first and you select the art later.
No, that's a good question because the one that we did with the big laurel through the space was as a result of the scale. That was a scale of a space that we hadn't encountered with Fred Perry before. And we thought actually as we were developing the design that's all down at this sort of level, we had a real chance to do something. So it was kind of hand in glove. It happened at the same time. We didn't think, right, now we've done the store, where's the special moment? We thought of it in conjunction with the two together. I think we might have started off with a more conventional laurel at the back of the store, but then I think we quickly realized that we were missing a real opportunity to do something special. So that was good. And I think there's a saying that sort of copying is the greatest form of flattery. I went to Tokyo recently and I went to one of their Fred Perry stores and they'd copied the reception desk that we designed and put it into one of their stores and they were using that as their reception desk. So they like what we do for them.
Thank you. ไม่มีแล้วเนาะโอเคถ้าไม่มีก็ Thank you so much for give us this inspired lecture.
Pleasure.
Thank you.